Section 15. The Dying, Biel-Tan, the Eldar, and the Lord of the Dead. Often, all that remained of a craft world was its titanic wraithbone skeleton, the pulsing infinity circuit, and the innumerable scattered soul gems glimmering with the life their murdered bodies had lost. These ghost craft worlds drifted silent and alone as the Eldar race was slowly, gradually culled. With a much reduced population, the remaining Eldar found it hard to defend what little colonial assets they still possessed. Often, the Exodites, confined to their paradise worlds, were left to fend for themselves. Some Exodite colonies were attacked by opportunistic alien empires such as the Hax Paterinius, a race of utterly alien, multi-limbed creatures that traveled the void using their Anam, ships made of pure energy. The Hax was thought to have unintentionally destroyed over a dozen Exodite worlds as the Hax would move on to a world and terraformed it to their preferred environment. Unfortunately, the Hax were native to worlds filled with sulfuric acid vapor and temperatures hot enough to melt lead. The Hax were a peaceful race, and only ever fought in self-defense. Nevertheless, they killed millions of Eldar in those early days. Some Exodite colonies were far more shrewd. When the Astronomicon spluttered and died, the sudden anarchy that shattered the Imperium drove the surviving power magnates and opportunistic warlords into a frenzy of land grabbing, and many maiden worlds were seized this way. Some Exodite worlds, such as the one led by Lesar Harom, dismantled the physical evidence of their culture, including all of the buildings and even the crop fields, before they hit themselves. The post-Imperial would arrive to find pristine, empty worlds and eagerly colonize them. Then slowly, the Exodites, under false guises and using trickery, charm, and subterfuge, would infiltrate all the high offices of these various petty Imperiums, becoming the strange, sinister lords of the realms who bizarrely never seemed to die of old age. Many of the small, northernmost Imperiums bordering Thexian and East Chaos Imperial space, such as the Harom Imperium, are likely to be led in secret by Exodites. With the death of the Emperor, a great wailing cry erupted throughout the warp as Slaanesh groaned. The Starfather, in its first waking moments, struck at Slaanesh first, sending the perverse prince reeling, at least initially. This shudder of frustrated lust and pride slammed into each craft world's infinity circuit like a hurricane. Though the barrage was resisted easily by the craft worlds, the Farseers were suddenly aware of new potential futures suddenly coming into existence. No matter how hard they scanned all possible futures, the predominant one was always the same. A great white fist, pressing the galaxy down. The galaxy would be silent, cold, and heartless. At first, the Farseers feared that this future represented the final victory of the younger star-hungry. However, this doom came not from the sterile dimensions of the Catan, but instead from the warp. Flinching back from their visions like children pulling their hands from the fire, they realized they had to act. The sudden upsurge in Eldar deaths due to the new Devourer opened a new avenue to the craftworlders. They all felt it, shifting beneath the surface of every single craftworld. Its name was death, yet it was hope. You need the god of the dead. It was growing and they knew it. The Eldar knew, while alive, they could not save the universe from the ancient enemy, and their souls would never be safe. Not really. Eventually, craft worlds became less and less frequent. Stories of the Eldars became myths, then legends, then lies to the rest of the galaxy, as the craft worlds pulled their forces from active engagement. The Farseers would not explain what they were planning as all their children returned to their craft worlds. They offered each of their people a stark choice. They could stay with their craft world and help save the galaxy and the Eldar, or they could leave, never to return. Their soul stones would be disconnected from the infinity circuit, and they would become of the path of the outcast. Only roughly 70,000 Eldar took this path. The others were too hopeful or too naive. Once the outcasts left, the Farseers, in their mercy, unleashed a nerve toxin throughout the craft worlds, killing billions of Eldar at that moment in an act of betrayal few Eldar could comprehend. even as they choked their last breaths. The warlocks and farseers then collected all the soul stones and emptied them directly into the infinity circuit before they each ritually fell upon their blades, and their souls too were transmitted into the growing infinity circuits. The great combined spirit rose up, swelled with such a vast sacrifice. It pulsed and swirled, and it did nothing. The vast, unimaginable power of Yanid was trapped within the infinity circuit. For though many craft worlds followed the route of sacrifice, there was one notable exception. Biel-Tan refused to accept such a morbid view of the situation. When approached by the other farseers of the other craft worlds, Asatar Bladesong, the ruling autarch of the Swordwind, responded, "Sacrifice? Death? Have you all lost your minds? We are the Azur, the Eldar. Our empire is overrun by barbarian Monkey and pathetic usurpers, and you wish to give them our empire without even resistance? This is our galaxy, not theirs. We are close to victory. Do not falter now." The delusional leaders of Biel-Tan could not accept defeat. They believed their craft world was on the verge of snatching back the galaxy from the filthy Imperium. When the Imperium collapsed, they took this as a sign and moved to full mobilization, leaving their fellow craft worlds to fester like they wished. Many of the outcasts from the other craft worlds, appalled at the actions of the Farseers, joined with Biel-Tan, taking new oaths of loyalty. Wild riders from Same-Han, spirit seers and the legendary Uriel from Eon-Den, vast numbers of rangers from Alaitok, and even a few dissidents from Dark Kamara were amongst the many Eldar loyal to the war effort. Using their perfectly honed combined arms tactics and their superior FTL system, the Swordwind's armies were devastatingly effective. From 488 Millennium 45 to 333 Millennium 46, the Biel-Tan engaged and defeated 3 petty Imperiums. The pathetically slow and inexperienced armies of the small clusters of human worlds were vastly insufficient in the face of the finely crafted killing machine that was the Eldar war host. Across the entire galaxy, the Biel-Tan set up discrete colonial outposts from where they could stage incursions anywhere in the galaxy virtually. Only the areas which had never had webway access were totally free of potential Biel-Tan. The combined military genius of both Asatar and Uriel was invaluable to the Biel-Tan wars, and they were instrumental in many of the victories of the period. Ignoring the strong advice of the Harlequins, the Biel-Tan struck at Tau targets, and even engaged in direct war with the Tau when they found a Sep world on the site of a maiden world. The war lasted several years, with Biel-Tan abandoning the world after seeding it with a special fungus which would prevent the Tau from ever growing crops upon the world, making it useless for colonization. A large force of Eldar later struck at Talarn-occupied space and decimated several worlds. It was only the unexpected and short-lived alliance of Talarn and Nophelia against the Eldar which drove them off. The Cocytus Imperium, an industrial active power in the galactic center, was engaged by Biel-Tan's First Fleet, which stripped the Imperium of its naval power in just 7 years, leaving it open to be torn apart by rival Imperiums. Increased Necron activity led to many more engagements with their ancient foes. Initially, they were successful. Of course, once the Ophalum Kaisaz was unleashed at the Battle of Fornostia, the Biel-Tan could no longer engage the Necrons on their own for fear of the Deceiver unleashing that terrible device once more. Nevertheless, the Eldar continued to engage the Necrons discreetly. In the year 000, Millennium 47, a troop of Harlequins came to Biel-Tan to perform the Dance of the Fall. However, these supposed Harlequins were in fact Dark Eldar witches in disguise, sent on a mission of assassination. When they were brought before the twin thrones of Uriel and Asatar, the witches threw off their disguises and battle was suddenly joined. These witches were of the witch cult of Strife, led by Lilith Hesperax herself. Startled civilians were slain by the scores, suddenly as the dire avengers, the bodyguards to Uriel and Asatar, fought with one another. The battle in the throne room was one of legends, with the superhuman Eldar darting unbelievably fast, faster than the mortal eye could follow. Asatar, The mistress of Biel-Tan and Master Autarch fought off scores of the psychotic Eldar, their blades and whips clashing with fine wraithbone blades and immortal skill. Lilith, her near-naked body unblemished by any scars, such was her skill, dueled with Uriel, Prince of Eondon and husband to Asatar. Their battle ranged from the high-vaulted rafters of the throne room down to the personal chambers of Uriel himself. The two combatants' blades were near invisible as they exchanged blows and parries with inhuman skill and speed. Lilith scored small cut after small cut against Uriel, somehow bypassing his personal force field. Bleeding and tired, Uriel at last finished the battle, driving the Spear of Twilight straight through the cursed Archite witch. Lilith hissed perversely as Uriel kicked her from his blade. Before her death, it was said she tasted her own blood for the first time in her life, and she giggled mockingly before Uriel finished her with a decapitating blow. The witches were defeated. Asatar, furious, sent the surviving witches back to Kamara, with every orifice sealed shut and their bodies filled with vile wasp-like jindy bugs which tore them apart from within. Within a year, the Biel-Tan leaders received another gift, a cask of perfectly blended Kamaran wine, which was surprisingly unpoisoned, along with a message written in blood, but in a supreme hand all the same. It congratulated Biel-Tan on electing such an exquisitely brutal mistress as their leader, and wished her good luck in her war with the Monkey. It was signed by Vecht himself. Though the Biel-Tan had fallen out of favor with the Harlequins, and were still considered enemies of the monstrous Dark Eldar, they were a formidable faction throughout the period, right up until Millennium 51. They never lost their arrogant sense of self-worth, and still believed that they could reclaim their empire even as the galaxy tumbled down about their ears. Such was the way of the last of the few, the remnants of the great Eldar corpse.